Our next speaker is Phil Alchin, who's the Managing Director of Boyce Chartered Accountants. And Phil's going to give us the good news and the bad news, I'm sure, of the latest Australian cotton comparative analysis. So thanks and welcome, Phil.
Thank you. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to talk today. I guess what I wanted to do was just run through the cotton comparative analysis, but particularly focus on our 2015 interim results that we've just got in. So I'll keep going with this pretty quickly. I haven't got a lot of time and just want to get a few key points through. Just a little bit about Boyce and who we are. So we're Australia's largest regionally based accounting firm with 5 offices in New South Wales. We like to think of us as cotton industry specialists. Obviously, out of our Wagga, Dubbo and Moree offices, we're servicing a fair whack of the cotton valleys. Just in terms of the cotton comparative analysis, we've been preparing it now since 1986. We're very proud of it as a benchmarking study for irrigated cotton. Since 2005, it's been a joint initiative of Boyce and the CRDC, and thank you to the CRDC for their continued support of the cotton comparative analysis. I guess just a couple of fundamentals which I think are really important to understand in terms of the report that we produce. At the end of the day, what we're saying is, what is the profitability, what is the cost, what is the income from growing 1 hectare of irrigated solid cotton on a fully absorbed basis? So it's not a farm benchmarking study. It's working out the profitability of growing 1 hectare of irrigated cotton. It's based on the actual profit results of participants. Many are clients, so many of the numbers are coming from actual profit and loss statements prepared on a management accounting basis. We are getting more and more non-clients into it, which is fantastic as we increase the numbers. And as I said, using full management accounting principles, matching income and expenses, so not based on tax financial statements, which a whole lot of industry information which is used by government is based on, unfortunately. Absolutely, we're keen to get more participants in the comparative analysis. The more participants we have in, the more we can learn from it. On that basis, obviously all information's confidential. Results are published on an average basis. Participants have the ability to see their own numbers as opposed to the average. In valleys where there isn't a big enough sample size, we don't produce and publish valley numbers to maintain that confidentiality. The information's dealt with and stays within Boyce. Just in terms of our interim results, so we've been working really hard over the last month to get some interim results in from the 14-15 season. I'm sure you can appreciate that's not easy to pull together within a couple of weeks at the end of the financial year. Here today from Boyce also are Simon Sellers, a director from our Wagga office, and Hamish Cullenwater, manager from Wagga, and also Sam Bassaglupo, a manager from our Moree office. And they'll actually be handing those, we've actually got these results printed out, and they'll be handing those out as we go to morning tea. Within these interim results, all farms average, but we've also got some Southern Valley numbers in this year from the Lachlan and Murrumbidgee, and Simon and Hamish have been working really hard, both with clients and non-clients down there to get these numbers in. And then Northern Valley numbers, which include a cross-section of participants from the Balonne, Border Rivers, Guida, Nemoy, Macquarie. So there's a bit of a cross-section here in the interim results. They are interim results, so we do have to be a bit cautious at the moment. We don't have the full sample in terms of what we actually draw from the numbers. However, I'm going to stick my neck out, and I guess I've based that on some discussions with some growers, and thank you to the growers that I just spoke to this morning to firm up a few things which I thought were coming out, and it was great. So I really appreciate that. Especially big thanks this morning, I think, to Sean Boland and Andrew Parks for just giving me some insight into maybe some of the things that were underpinning the numbers. Based on their knowledge of northern and southern valleys. just in terms of the numbers, I guess one of the big things that we're seeing, obviously from 15, which we knew anecdotally was the big increase in yield. At this stage, all farms average at 12.6 bales to the hectare. Northern Valley's 13, Southern Valley's nearly 12. Thanks, I guess, sorry, just in terms of that, I guess what we need to do is just think that, in terms of the sample size, once we get the full results in, they might change a bit. But you'll see a bit when we have a look at the trends that, as an average, that's a huge increase, by quite a bit, by nearly 2 bales to the hectare on the averages achieved. So I should say that in these we haven't worked out actually a top 20% yet for these numbers because the sample size isn't large enough. But it will be interesting to see how the yield for the top 20% compares to the average once we report. Price per bale, very healthy, $495 a bale at the moment. In the cotton comparative analysis, it's lint plus seed, less levies, less ginning. That's how we get to our price per bale. Makes it really easy then. We don't have to worry too much about gin for seed deals and all those sort of things. It all comes out in the wash. Cost of production per bale, which you'll see in a minute, the cost of production per hectare is extremely high in our sample. The cost of production per bale has been maintained at $372 on the back of the yield, despite cost of production being sort of an average of $4,500 to $4,600 a hectare, which is extremely high, and there's obviously some mitigating factors in that, and we'll talk about that a bit more in the trends. Profit per hectare, extremely healthy, $1,500 a hectare. As an average, that's a good number, and I think that might be the third or fourth highest. If that average, if that continued through to the full results, that'd be the third or fourth highest in the history of the cotton comparative analysis as an all farms average. So I'll be interested to see what the top 20% is. I just pulled a couple of costs out, which I thought were interesting. Energy expense per hectare. I guess when I think of energy expense, I do think of fuel and diesel, but I also think of fertiliser being crop energy or energy required by the crop. $1,213 a hectare average, and I guess that comes out at about $96 a bale in those. And if you split that, that's roughly 50-50. 50% diesel and electricity, 50% fertiliser. So what's that, $48 a bale for each, which is pretty significant. Some differences, and you'll see in the numbers some differences between the southern and northern valleys there. Fertiliser higher in the northern valleys, electricity much higher in the southern valleys. And on the plant and labour side, it's a significant cost of growing a cotton crop, $1,568 a hectare. Within that number, I've just absorbed, as well as contracting, labour depreciation, all of the costs. So one of the things is we base our numbers on real numbers. So over the years, I've had someone say, "Oh, gee, you've only got $180 a hectare there for contract picking. We can't pick our crop for $180 a hectare." Well, that's the actual cost because the grower or growers actually had some of their own pickers as well, and those costs would have been in depreciation, labour, R&M. Water charge is another interesting one, and I think that's a bit reflective. You can see the difference there between the southern and the northern. I think it's reflective of the water purchased in the southern valleys to finish the crop down there. I guess it's fair to say that obviously we had two distinct seasons between the southern and the northern valleys. So northern valleys reduced area as a result of reduced water availability. Southern valleys, different issues, extended field preparation, and a bit of pressure on field preparation at the start due to a wet winter, and due to more back-to-back cotton, and then purchasing water toward the end to finish the crop. This is, I think, I was talking about yield earlier, and you can see there yield of just under 13 bales to the hectare. And when you compare that to averages achieved previously, it well and truly stands out. It'll be interesting to see what the top 20% ends up. But you can see there, anecdotally, we all know that last year was a fantastic year, a fantastic growing season, and we all know the yield. The yields achieved will be well above what we've achieved previously. Interesting though, if we just reflect back here on the trend from the difference between the average in blue and the top 20% in yellow, the trend line's actually coming together in terms of yield achieved, which I think is something we've been noticing for a few years, that on average a greater yield's being achieved as compared to the top 20%. It's coming closer together. I guess variety is having a huge impact on that, and agronomic practices. But I think that's an interesting concept. Operating expenses per hectare. So I guess at the moment just a bit under $4,500 a hectare, which is huge in the scheme of things as the average for the for all the farms that we have in our interim results at the moment. And you can see that that's a big jump. I think there's a few contributing factors in that. Obviously with our Northern Valley guys, we've got overheads being spread over a much less area, and so that's having an impact. With the higher yields achieved, I guess as the yield potential was understood as we went through the season, there was potentially greater inputs thrown at some of these crops to achieve the yield. Obviously an increased yield also throws up increased costs in terms of cartage, contracting, those sort of costs that are directly yield related. Coming out of the south, I think maybe a little bit different. Obviously input costs would obviously be a player. I think increased ground preparation costs as a result of the wet winter and the back-to-back cotton and the pressure to get those ground preparation costs finished. I think also the purchase of water toward the end in the south has had an impact on that. I'm cautious probably to draw too many conclusions from that big jump at the moment until we actually have the full sample in and can work through that. But I think it tells the story of the importance of the big yield increase in keeping the cost of production of a bale down, and why that's important. So operating profit per hectare, I was talking about how it appears like it's shaping up as a profitable year despite the increased cost per hectare, and this demonstrated it. So looking at an average there of a bit over $1,500 a hectare, and when you look back across, 2011 obviously was an extremely profitable year for average all farms. Coming out of the drought, not a whole lot of back-to-back cotton, so that had a huge impact there. But you can see this will still end up a really profitable year, largely driven by yield. I always find this slide really interesting, and sorry, we'll talk about it a little bit in a minute in terms of the importance of understanding your cost of production for a bale. If we look here, so we're saying $373 a bale, average cost of production before interest, $122 profit per bale before interest is the average at the moment. It's a profitable year. Largely we're maintaining that despite the significant increase in cost per hectare. As a result of increased yield, we're maintaining our average cost of production. I guess over time, what we've found is that the top 20%, their cost of production is closer to $300 a bale, and that should be the aim. I wonder if that will change. Just a couple of quick things which have consistently come out of our cotton comparative analysis in terms of what the best growers do. As I said, their cost of production is generally around $300 a bale before interest. They're targeting that. They have consistent marketing strategies. Granted, that's hard to do with uncertain water availability, but they have consistent marketing strategies, and they understand what their cost of production is. They have productive labour, so generally one full-time equivalent per 220 hectares, and reliable machinery. 400 tractor horsepower per 500 hectares, aim to pick their crop within 21 days, not always achieved. The other thing, just come out with some discussions that I've had over the last couple of days in the south, as well as with reliable machinery, is irrigation infrastructure. And obviously we've seen some changes down there with crops grown and some modifications to irrigation infrastructure, and being able to get the water on in a timely way has a big impact. So that would also be included in that. And I guess the productive labour and the reliable machinery have a big impact on timing, which is the key at the end of the day. Obviously crop rotation is the biggie. Water efficiency, less than a megabale. Conservative levels of debt to help ride out the tough times. And efficient financial management systems and processes. So well planned, well under control. Just wanted to finish with this. Yield is still king, but, and I guess in the northern valleys, this sounds pretty obvious, probably, but it's something that we often talk through with people, is that in low water years, non-direct costs have an increased impact on your profitability. Spread over less hectares, and so if you don't have water security, it's what you do with the profits you make in the good years that's really important. And of course, it's the tight control of overhead costs that has a big impact in those tight years. Look, that's a V8 tour of it. Certainly, as I said, you can grab the detailed numbers as you go to morning tea, and we're happy to discuss those with you and talk through it. And keen to get more participants in, and look forward to getting the full report out when we can. Thank you. Got time for questions? Energy? Yeah, I guess, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and I just can't remember who we were talking it through with, it struck me that energy is not just about diesel and electricity, but it's also about potential nutrition for the crop as well, or energy. Don't know, just something I thought was an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah. Great.
Just on your nitrogen, that's probably about 80% of all the energy used on the farm is nitrogen. So it kind of makes sense in my mind, that way at least. Cotton growers have a lot of different benches, so how do you separate those out? And just on the fertiliser, do you have any plans to sort of maybe expand it and keep litres in kilowatt hours or kilos of nitrogen benchmark plans?
Yeah. Now look, so good questions. Yep. So absolutely, cotton growers do have a lot of enterprises, and probably more so now with more southern growers tend to have a greater mix. So with our clients, it's relatively easy. We budget, they report monthly, we prepare financial statements split by enterprises using consistent cost drivers, using a variety of cost drivers, particularly for, so there's a whole lot of costs which they split as they process their payments, and then there's other direct costs that are split based on various cost drivers, and there's cost drivers for overheads. With non-clients, we put their numbers in, we go through the same process, just that it's collected in a different manner, and then we work through and have discussions with the growers to ensure the robustness of those allocations. Sorry, your second question? Yeah. Look, it's certainly something that we've spoken about. I guess it's only as good as the information that's collected on farm at the end of the day, and that's probably been a bit of a challenge to date in getting that information across all participants. Certainly some of our larger participants and some of our more organised participants, you know, collect that information, but some don't. But absolutely, it's something that interests us. But by the same token, there's a whole lot of other work happening on various research projects that have been covering off on those issues. So, you know, I guess we've been keeping that in mind as well. Thank you.